All right, awesome, thanks. So I'll call this meeting to order. It's 11:35 a.m. I also wanted to make note at the beginning that the Teams chat is not part of the official record. So if you type something in the chat, please speak it into the record as well so that we have a complete record of the meeting. Moving on to the land acknowledgement. The land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationships that exist between Indigenous peoples and the land. I'd like to acknowledge we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, future stewardship of the land on which we live. So we can take a roll call, please.
Mr. Matthew Harvey,
Present.
Mr. Al Tamani,
Here.
Mr. Robert Helzer,
Here.
Mr. Mark Lukin, Ms. Carla McConnell, Mr. Jared Riedel,
Present.
and Ms. Carmela Warfield.
Thank you. So we are short of quorum. We're pretty close with regards to the number of active members on the board that we have. So we'll try to fill up some of the spots in the future. I'm not sure. We went back and forth. Do we need to approve the agenda if we don't have a quorum? We'll do it anyway, so that way we'll get it up. So I'll move to approve the agenda. Second. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved as written. So it's real briefly the chair's report. Again, we're pretty close to at the minimum number of people we can have on the board for quorum. So I know of a few people who've submitted applications. So I think what we're going to try to do is see if we can get those applications in front of the assembly for approval and placement on the board as quickly as we can, so that we can at least one or two people can be missing and we can still have quorum and at least conduct business and not just receive informational reports as the board.
How many are we looking for?
I know of at least 3 that have submitted applications, but I think we have 5 open spots right now that are either open or expired.
We can get some homeless people.
So we'll be looking at that, and then another real brief thing at 1:00 we have the assembly has a rules committee meeting, and I'll be going to present to the assembly real briefly on the things that the Budget Advisory Commission is doing, and I'll bring up attendance and appointees as well. It's something that is a little out of our control. With, sometimes people have things to do and everything. It's a volunteer board. But I think that's my whole chair's report. Moving on to informational reports from the mayor's office. Maybe OMB has anything about.
Through the chair to the committee, Nolan Clauda is downstairs with the legislative committee of the assembly right now. But he wanted to let everybody know that part of the budget process that you will be hearing about today is what the mayor's office has been working on for the last couple of weeks and months, focused on the 3 priorities of the LaFrance administration: good government, safe streets and trails, and building our future. The changes that we will go through in the budget total about $25 million altogether, with the tax cap formula accounting for about $12 million of that. I think Nolan will have some other things to mention that he might be able to make in time for before the end of this meeting. But if he does not, he will be at the next meeting.
Perfect, thank you. If he shows up, we probably roll back up the agenda to get a brief overview from him. Moving on to the assembly, I think the assembly members who normally present are also on the legislative committee. So if they come up a little bit later.
I think Member Zalatel was going to be available at the front of this meeting, but if she's not yet, she'll sign in.
Okay, we can roll back up if they're here as well. Moving on to ASD.
I think Member Lessons is on the line, so I'll let her take it.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for having me, and along with our administration expert, Ms. Parrott. I wanted to just briefly touch on a couple of things that are happening in the district. It's a busy time of year, and there are a lot of initiatives moving forward. The board has received a number of briefings this fall, actually going back to April of 2024, again in June, August, September, early October, on the right sizing process. And where we are right now is that the administration has presented a draft rubric for how schools will be evaluated, according to major components like program effectiveness, the asset value, the cost effectiveness, the growth potential, sort of demographic growth in that school's area, in the sort of perceived future possible alternative uses. So we have a potential rubric that the board is going to, I believe, approve at an upcoming meeting. And that rubric will then inform, the data coming out of that rubric will then inform the creation of a list of schools that would be considered for consolidation. And this is going to also require school boundary adjustments. But because we have so many elementary feeders going into middle schools, and then, excuse me, some middle schools feed into multiple high schools, this is pretty complex because the administration wants to minimize, pardon me, the disruptions to students and families as much as possible. So I think we're looking at a possibly like a 3-year process. Katie can correct me if I'm wrong, to, at the end of the day, support better educational programming and increased staffing capacity at each school. So really dose our students with more effective staffing ratios rather than spreading them more thinly. And I think at the end of the day, that would diminish like the number of unintentional combination classes and support the opportunity to repurpose some ASD buildings or spaces in support of something like childcare. So there's a lot going on there. I wanted to pivot to the second area that we've been talking about, and that's we're starting to get our first glimpses of the FY26 deficit. In short, and I think I talked about this at the last meeting, my understanding that it's roughly a $111 million structural deficit, and our available fund balance, which by and large is coming from funds that we received from the legislature in FY25, the one-time funds. We saved the majority of that to offset really this fiscal cliff. And depending on how much we spend, we can bring the deficit down to either $84 million, and that's if we abide by kind of best practices and leave, enough reserves for emergencies, unanticipated healthcare costs, that sort of thing. Or if by a supermajority of the board, we spend our fund balance to 5%, the deficit is then brought down to about $64 million, both of which are still quite substantial. And even as we consider the efficiencies that are going to, and cuts, quite frankly, depending on what words you would like to use, even if and when we make those cuts, further investing in the academies of Anchorage in the schedule change proposal would incur $3.5 to $5 million more. It would grow that deficit next year to bring the academies of Anchorage forward. So we would need to make or identify some trade-offs given our unknown fiscal picture. And so the last thing I wanted to touch on is I believe that there is going to be a survey about the academies of Anchorage that may be released as soon as tomorrow, I believe later this week. And that URL is asdk12.org/academies survey. And you can see a couple of items posted to that webpage already, but the survey itself will not yet launch. But you can see some like a slide deck on bell schedule variations and sort of a highlight of schedule comparisons. Currently, high schoolers have 6 periods in a semester. The ASD, in order to implement the academies of Anchorage to create space for additional career technical education, would like to propose either a 7 or 8 period per semester schedule, and those have additional costs. So we have a deficit that is years and years in the making, but to move forward with the proposed academies will require an additional investment somehow, somewhere. So I will pause there and let Katie take over for what I've forgotten.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lessons. No, you covered it. I think a few things to highlight, tagging along with what Ms. Lessons presented, is some of the aspects of the evaluation rubric that the district has kind of been putting together that will kind of guide how the evaluation of the right sizing initiative goes. One of those, of course, is the education level of service. So really looking at program effectiveness within a school size and a population size to make sure that we're getting the best possible service options, outcomes for those schools. Also the asset value. So we really need to take a look at the facility condition, what the expected costs might be, and what the investment has been in that facility previously to kind of have that in the forefront, as well as cost effectiveness. What will the potential be to our financial bottom line for any potential changes, of course, as well as growth potential. So we wouldn't want to take a look at maybe downsizing in an area that there's like a new housing development. There's going to be an increase to the population in that community or neighborhood. So being aware of those future potential for growth as well as alternative use of some of those facilities. So as has been presented previously, the district is interested in investing in preschool, the potential for existing charters to maybe make use of facilities, or bringing on additional services in partnership with the community, such as increasing the potential for childcare. So those will be some guiding principles to evaluate and establish metrics that we'll be using in that rubric. And really, some of the goals is getting to a place of having a very properly resourced school. So making sure that there's balanced class sizes, that the programs and opportunities in each one of those schools are equitable and also diverse, that we're leveraging full-time school support staff. So one of the parts of the discussion is when we have itinerant staff or staff who are moving from location to location, there might be a situation in which one school is only offered specific services one day a week. And so if a student is absent on that day, they might miss out on a service for that entire week. And so when we're kind of doing this right sizing and matching services, there might be more potential for students not to miss out on those core services. Also establishing safe and healthy schools, making sure that there's an adequate budget to meet students' needs, and that we're minimizing the unintended consequences of spreading ourselves too thin, like combination classes and those kinds of things. So the right sizing initiative is really trying to take into consideration the full scope of impact of all of those decisions to the education services, but also the community and the city as a whole. Moving on to another topic, I do see that you have an assembly member present, so I'm going to try to go quick and make time for that. But another one of the presentations that was provided to the board recently in work session was related to the bond projects. So I thought I'd give a very quick overview of the projects that are currently in process. They're really in two main categories. One is roof and structural projects. So we know that we need to take care of our roofs and protect our buildings. So that is currently there's 9 schools that have projects related to structural components of the building or roof. However, there's also another component for safety and security of our school facilities. And as you know, that's kind of a pressing issue in our current time. So we have camera upgrades for some of the schools that are in place. Another one of the big projects that really helps to establish safe and secure schools is those secure vestibules and controlling access to the schools. So we have, 7 schools that there are projects related to securing those entries or dealing with access points, as well as fire alarm replacements, which obviously is very important. So all of those projects are in process ongoing. We have monthly meetings where we review all of the progress on all of the capital projects across the district. And so those are moving forward as intended. Last but not least, I should mention too that I provided the presentations that were given to the board in work session to Erin so that she could share those out. And I believe she provided those online for you to review. So there's a lot of detailed information that I'm not going to go into detail here. But one of the most important things that I wanted to alert the commission to is the Department of Education and Early Development is proposing a regulations change that will significantly impact the Anchorage School District and a request that we put forward to the municipality. That's related to the definition found in 4 AAC 09990 that defines what a local contribution is. And this became a topic that was kind of contentious related to things that were happening in the Juneau School District in previous years. Also related to the state's disparity test as it relates to their ability to deduct impact aid from the total aid that's provided to districts in the state of Alaska. So there used to be, in current law, the definition of a local contribution is specific to what goes into what's contributed to the operating fund. So there were things that were considered, I don't know if you've heard this language or this language is familiar, but we have a cap on what we can receive from the local municipality based on the foundation formula. And so there were contributions that have been made across the state to city, borough, school districts that were considered outside the cap. And the reason they were considered outside the cap and allowable is because of this definition that was specific to what goes into the operating fund as deemed a local contribution. So things that have been contributed to food service fund, transportation fund, student activities fund, community services fund, and other kinds of special revenues that districts manage were not considered to go against the cap. And the state is looking at changing that definition to essentially include everything that's contributed to a school district by a municipality, except for what could go into debt service, capital fund, and community services fund. And so some of these things are defined by what's called the Alaska State Chart of Accounts that gives us definitions for what's included in different kinds of funds that districts manage. The other thing that is being pursued as a regs change is the definition of an in-kind service, so that would exclude in-kind services for community services and teacher housing. So some of the districts and city boroughs do provide teacher housing, and so that would be excluded from what would be considered a local contribution. What this means for districts across the state, including ASD, is that one of the requests that the assembly and the municipality has provided to the district is to supplement our transportation fund for people transportation that has had a shortfall and a deficit there for many years. And so last in this current approved budget, that's about 9 million in supplemental funding. One of the things to keep in mind is that the adjustment to the amount that's provided for pupil transportation across the state has not been adjusted for inflation or any cost increases since 2016 or possibly 2015. During that time, it's been very, very clear that what the state is contributing to that program is not close to keeping up with the cost of operating that program. So for almost any district in the state. So districts have made decisions to cut routes or to change their provision of pupil transportation to deal with that shortfall. A lot of districts have continued to providing at full service by having some of those supplemental contributions or figuring out a way to make that fund whole, potentially by directing operating funds to pupil transportation. So we are going to be in a position where if this proposed regulation goes into effect for FY26, which is what the department has suggested they are proposing, that's going to be kind of a difficult position for the district because the municipality has been supporting that program. So we're looking at all options. We're providing feedback to the department related to the proposed regulation change. and working with our statewide associations to see what the full impact of this change would be for districts across the state. But this will definitely impact ASD and will change how we request funds from the municipality if it goes into effect for FY26. So,
Any questions?
all right.
Real quick question, like, I guess, any feedback since school year's now started on, the different start times, the different middle school, and the academies as it started running?
I bet Ms. Lessons could speak to that a little bit better than I do.
Yeah, that's it's a great question. People tend to provide feedback when they are either unhappy or very happy, and the board has received both. My understanding is that the district is going to be monitoring the data, anecdotally, and then reporting to the board. Anecdotally, anyone can go to our data dashboard, and you can look at the attendance monitoring dashboard, which I think is really interesting, and attendance is up district-wide. So although I 100% understand that for many families and stakeholders, this change is a challenge, for whatever reason or reasons, attendance is better than it has been in previous years. So that is one piece of feedback that I'm at least looking at as we're moving forward. That said, the year is young. So I guess I'm saying that I am waiting for more of a formal presentation from the administration to the board. But we have heard folks who are, really happy that their high schooler is sleeping in, and we have heard from folks who are really unhappy that their elementary student is getting up early.
Understandable. Change is tough sometimes. All right. Well, for the sake of time, if no more questions, we can move on to the assembly members. Altel's on fine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Sorry, I ran late. So a couple of things, as you all know, we're in budget season, and I am sure the OMB director will talk with you more about the budget, but there are a couple of things I kind of wanted to flag to see if the Budget Advisory Commission is interested in giving us any advice on in the next month as we work through the budget. One is, you'll see in the proposed budget the idea of special levies for snow removal equipment as well as for other fleet replacement. So the idea of using a tax levy instead of a bond, I think that would be a really great item to flag for you all in terms of what you think about that. That would be a change of approach. Otherwise, with regard to the budget, it's primarily a continuation budget. There are some moves which we anticipate with any new administration, some reorganization. So if you have any thoughts about that as well, that would be great to get some feedback on. And then the other thing I wanted to flag for you all, there was just a work session today on Project Anchorage. I know you all have had a presentation, I believe. That ordinance is intended to be introduced on the 22nd of October. The sponsors say they're going to be working on a substitute version, but the specifics of that I am uncertain on. And if it is introduced for October 22nd, the public hearing would be the 6th of November. It's a short turnaround, but if you all have thoughts that you would like to share with the Assembly on that particular proposal or other pieces of the revenue conversation, I think it's very timely. Having a revenue conversation while we're also contemplating the budget is always timely. And so we want to make sure we're hearing from you all for your expertise and thoughts on both facets. I think the last thing I would say is we will soon be meeting, and I'm sure Ona can probably give a little bit more information on this, but we'll be meeting with Visit Anchorage soon, and the bed tax has performed so well over the last couple of years. I believe our convention center reserve fund is up to date. And so there's some questions and some issues to think through around where some of those funds should be allocated. And we're going to be having that conversation with Visit Anchorage. But again, this would be one of those areas. We are restricted by what is in the charter and in code. But they think that within those restrictions, there is a menu of options to be considered about where to spend some of this surplus money. And so I wanted to raise that with you all. So that you can think about that as we're kind of contemplating the moving pieces of our fiscal picture. And then last, we can have it shared with you on the MLMP sale and the Alaska Center for Treatment. The municipal attorney and municipal manager have given us a very clear interpretation of what we need to do when, and I think it's a little bit different than maybe what some of the expectations around that project were. And the reason I raise that is it means we don't necessarily have to have a treatment center operational by October 2025, which we've heard from potential providers would have some budget implications for us, that they see a 1 to 2 year runway to turn on such a facility. So you won't see that in the budget probably for 2025. But I wanted to flag that for you, and we can get kind of what that project looks like in that timeline moving forward, and the pieces that do need to move in the next year, because it is one of those things that has kind of a running deadline on it. I think that those are the big pieces of what's on our mind around the finances of the municipality right now. Our first budget work session is Friday. We get a Friday off, and then we'll come back to it the following Friday. And then on November 8th, I believe it is, we'll be taking up our budget amendments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks. Any questions?
Yeah, I think that one of the problems that we've had is that where funds are going by the assembly. We take a look at our streets and roads. They are terrible. Yet you collect $14 to $16 million on gasoline taxes. Why don't you just take all that money and use it to improve roads, not to construct them, but to pave and repave? That will solve that problem. The other thing you mentioned is there's possibly going to be some surplus funds from the convention center. Why not take those and improve your roads? That is very, very important when you drive around this town all over. Potholes, rough roads, everything. Let's start taking care of the general public a little more.
I appreciate those comments. I know that the additional monies around the bed tax are restricted to specific uses. And so I think that there's some restrictions there. And then with regard to the gasoline tax, I hear you. Some of it is also capacity. We can allocate funds to do road projects, but there is only so much capacity to do those road projects year over year. And right now, as we bond even through the road service area, those storm drainage and repave projects even, I believe, are being presented at the maximum capacity of what we believe can be accomplished in a particular year. So I hear it. I think if that is a priority of this commission to advise us that you want some prioritization around potholes and road conditions, I would very much love to see that in a resolution. And I think that would be an important consideration for us to have. And I will ask some questions as we have the PM&E department with us, and we talk about the CIP and CIB to address your questions. But I believe it's a capacity issue, but if I am mistaken, I will get that clarification as we have those work sessions on the budget.
Yeah, I think the purpose of us recommending at that time to the assembly to put a gasoline user fee on of 10 cents a gallon was to have those funds available and put aside and set to take care of roads years and years ago. But it's never been done. In fact, I think that's on our agenda here in the future. But we also can't provide you a resolution because we don't have enough members. We don't have enough for a quorum.
Do you not
So I
have,
think, but we don't have enough members for this commission to give you a resolution because we don't have a quorum.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. One thing that I appreciate is like coming with a few questions such as special levies about the reorganization and kind of changes in the new budget. And, coming with some things that we can do resolutions about. That is one thing I was mentioning earlier in the chair's report is something we're struggling with. We're kind of at our minimum number of members we can have. And if we have 100% attendance of active members, we can hit quorum just barely. So it is something we're struggling with right now. But I know there's some applications that are out there and it's something we're working on. And then kind of moving on to another thing, I think it's good meeting with the Visit Anchorage folks. I think it was in May or June, we submitted a resolution relating to short-term rentals, but also the room and bed tax. I think there are some recommendations in there about use of the convention center fund and definition of tourism, I think was what it was. Definition of promotion of tourism industry. So in there we had some whereas statements and some be it resolved statements that I think related to the things that you're mentioning. But I think those are more comments than questions, I think, just to jump in there.
okay, I'll dig that back up and we'll get that moving again as we have those conversations with Visit Anchorage and other ways. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we're gonna move on to budget, OMB and budget stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Ona Brous, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I'm happy to be here with everyone today to present the 2025 Mayor's proposed budget information. The handouts that you have available are a copy of the proposed org chart for the municipality, the general government operating budget overview section, which is the narrative component of the budget book, and ideally the easiest one to carry around as opposed to 900 pages of budget books. And the capital improvement budget, including the bond list that is proposed as part of the 25 budget. There is also a copy of the proposed bond map. And I think that all of those items are available to the members online. The links that were sent with the budget from Aaron earlier. If we need copies of them to be visible for online participants, let me know. We can get those to you. To start, as members Alatel mentioned, the org chart is changing slightly from the previous iteration. Mostly it's remaining the same. The biggest change is the creation, or I should say reintroduction, of the Chief Administrative Officer position. That position has existed within the municipality before, many, many years ago, when there was sort of a wider breadth of responsibilities across more people than just the municipal manager and a deputy municipal manager. The goal of the Chief Administrative Officer and the structure of that workflow is to keep the internal service departments of the municipality together as one sort of responsible unit. So purchasing and IT, the finance offices, the venue management of some of our public buildings risk management has been moved over into the administrative column. And the municipal manager column has retained the operational side of the community departments. So the police department, the fire department, the health department, library, parks and rec, public transportation, and all of the utilities and enterprises. The community development column has been rebranded as planning, development, and public works. But the departments underneath that column remain the same as they have been over the last few years, minus the building services department, which was vacant and unfunded. So losing that out of the workflow has not created any problems that we have seen. The overall org chart is changed by, I think, 3 positions. The chief administrative officer, a grant development officer, and a senior finance official to work specifically on the audited financials for the municipality. Are there any questions on the org chart?
This might have existed already. What was the IT?
So the I-team actually has existed before. They were not called out as a division in the past. The I-team has existed since, I believe, 2015, 2016. And they are an innovation team that is focused specifically on finding efficiencies and creating different opportunities for efficient workflows within government. So they work with all departments that need to or are interested in creating different kinds of opportunities that may be making our process faster, better.
Like a business process improvement.
Yeah, very much. And the grant development office that's also under the chief administrative officer is one of the positions I mentioned that is new. The intention of that is to respond to the availability of federal and other private sector dollars that can be brought into the municipality as revenue supplementals in order to create some more opportunities for funding the deferred maintenance within the municipality. The federal compliance office that is just above the grant development office is the Office of Equal Opportunity rebranded. The Office of Equal Opportunity is technically a federal compliance office. They exist to comply with federal regulations that the municipality has to operate under. The bulk of local governments have renamed their equal opportunity offices, federal compliance offices, specifically to get rid of any confusion that may come from the name that is not very clear about what the goals of the office are, and specifically making that very obvious that that is what that responsibility is.
How does that work with our quasi judicial equal rights, equity, and justice?
They're separate. The Office of Equal Opportunity name has always sort of created some misunderstanding about what the work.
Ensuring the EEO compliance. Right?
Correct. It's ensuring the federal compliance with the EEO from the federal side, but it doesn't have to do with equal rights or any of the work that the AERC does, the Equal Rights Commission, or that the Equity and Justice Office does.
Thanks.
Great. We can move on to general government overview. If this big packet of narrative is the storytelling portion of our budget proposal. And the major focus from the administration for the 2025 proposed was making sure that we have increased recruitment and retention with our municipal personnel. Leaning into the good government work of financials, making sure that our books are audited and our fund balances are known. Safe streets and trails, improving the community opportunities in our public spaces, and building our future. So that can mean lots of different things. In this circumstance, the budget has more proposals for deferred maintenance improvements and facilities improvements that have not been occurring over the last many years, and are putting some of our buildings in unsafe situations. The tax cap calculation on page 15 of that overview shows you the entire process for the 2025 proposed tax cap formula. If you start with last year's taxes collected and remove all of the previous other taxes that are included in the tax cap, to be automobile tax, tobacco tax, the marijuana, because marijuana sales tax has been removed from the tax cap as part of the public vote from, I believe, 2 years ago, or maybe that was last year. The fuel excise tax and the payment in lieu of taxes from federal and state entities, and the MUSA and MISA, which is essentially property tax for our utilities and enterprises. That gives our total to, out of step one, $417,086,244. Then once we step through the judgments and legal settlements, which are collected outside the cap as they are determined throughout the previous budget year, the $2.4 million that was collected in 2024 is being removed from the tax cap calculation as part of this proposed budget, as well as the debt service that was paid for 2024, which brings us down to the tax limit base on line 17 of 359 million. After we do adjustments for population changes and CPI over the last 5 years, we round those to an average. We get a $9 million increase to the tax limit to 368 million. And the new construction, previously approved operations and maintenance costs, and the known judgments and settlements for 2025 are then added to the tax cap for the limit on all taxes that can be collected to be $429 million. Then we do the same thing at the top of the page, only we reverse all of the other taxes out of the tax cap limitation to get the limit on property taxes that can be collected for the 2025 proposed budget, which is $344 million. There is additional tax cap availability because of one of the issues that the school district was talking about earlier, and the way the cap is split between the school district and general government, bringing the limit on property taxes to $346,490,356. Once the proposed budget went through all of its machining, we landed at the property taxes to be collected under the cap by 173,000. Overall, the change in the tax limit calculation between the 2024 revised budget and the 2025 proposed budget is about $12 million. Any questions on that?
What are we doing with the marijuana tax? Where does that go?
The marijuana tax was voted on to be turned into the Alaska Child Care and Early Education Fund. So the marijuana taxes were removed from the tax cap calculation and set aside specifically to be managed and managed by a board organization and to fund early education and child care development opportunities. So pre-K, childcare providers will be able to access that funding. There is I believe, a 9-member board that was created as part of the public vote. And that board creates the recommendations of how those marijuana revenues should be used on an annual basis. That proposal goes forward to the mayor. The mayor then incorporates any of those recommendations into her proposed budget, and you will see them in the budget book. They're in the same appendix as the alcohol tax recommendations.
How much has been collected?
The 2024 collections were about $5.7 million and have been set aside waiting for the board to be appointed in order to approve where those are spent. So those are being held in the marijuana fund right now. And the 2025 proposed collection is also $5.7 million, depending on any consumption changes that may occur. And the recommended budget for 2025 includes spending about 3/4 of that total in 2025, pending assembly approval and then the board coming together. And
Oh, they've got about $10 million in there now.
yes, or they will once 2025 is rolling through and collecting taxes there. Right now, they have about 5.7. Any other questions? No? Okay. If you turn to page 17, which is the next page right after the tax cap calculation, there's the position summary by department. You can see the position changes that occurred. As part of the org chart transition, there look to be more position changes than are actually occurring. What's happening is many of those positions are coming out from underneath the municipal manager and being transferred over into the chief administrative office. The technical additions to the mayor's proposed budget is one additional senior finance officer in the controller's office to work on audited financials, one grant development officer, and where's the other one? I remember the third one was. But the other positions that are changing in here are the community navigation positions in the library. They were previously funded in the alcohol tax, and they have been moved from the alcohol tax into the general government budget for the library. So it shows them moving from the alcohol tax into general government. On page 9 of the overview, this is the wonderful table everybody wants, table 4. Table 4 gives you the total impact of the changes to the tax cap per 100,000 of assessed value within the municipality. The total change as of right now with our preliminary numbers in the 2025 proposed is approximately $5 per 100,000 of assessed value. So for your average home, which in Anchorage these days is $450,000, we're looking at a little more than 25 bucks, maybe 20 bucks.
Yet our population shrinking. So.
Saying that change, build more homes.
That is one way to improve the tax base. Create more property. Are there any questions on any of those points?
There was I guess, more allowance of hybrid work, remote work in the municipality. Does that affect positions, or I guess, is there any project-based work that is being brought on as part of the budget, which is, I don't know how that would be tagged as part-time.
As part of the recruitment and retention improvements within the municipality, we have, I think it's about to become real and signed, the telework policy, the telecommuting policy that we have that enables municipal employees more flexible work opportunities, which not only improves our own efficiency, but allows for people who are looking for that opportunity in places where they work to take jobs at the municipality. We've gotten a great response so far from the departments who are or have been waiting for this to be activated. Does it open the opportunity for more project-based work? I think that it does. The municipality has already had positions that are established specifically as remote work for project-based work. And there are other recruitment and retention improvements that go along with that. There is little to no budget impact on a sort of overall comprehensive scale. It would be on a singular individual basis if there are any costs associated with it. But they are agreements between the employees and their supervisors directly for which days they may be able to work remotely and under what circumstances. There have been some other recruitment and retention improvements made specifically at addressing the challenges associated with some of our more technical jobs and the availability of those skilled people to be not located in Alaska. But the goal is to hire within Alaska and particularly within Anchorage.
Those are hybrid or fully remote or either? Depending.
Either, it depends. It's on a case-by-case basis. The telework policy, I think, allows for supervisors to determine what works best based on the division that the people are working in and what department and position they were hired into originally. Some positions are established from the beginning as remote work positions. There's quite a few IT positions that are hard to fill because they require very specific skills, and making them remote eligible is always a way to improve their recruitment.
I have a question on these grants. Say, for example, $1 million to XYZ Group, and that's taxpayer money, a lot of it. And my questions, are those ever audited for 501c3 compliance? And what's been the results of those audits?
Through the chair to Mr. Simani, the audits are, depending on what department the grants go through, the 501c3 requirement is part of the grant agreement. So evidence of 501c3 existence and all of the paperwork associated, including insurance requirements, all come in at the beginning of the grant agreement. Otherwise, the grant agreement can't be signed. For audit purposes, as far as expense and reimbursement, we've had conversations about the idea of auditing them specifically to make sure that the past history is still moving forward the way that it was intended to, and we haven't sort of slid off in one direction. There are conversations at the assembly level also interested in that same thing. And that will be something that the grant development officer and the chief administrative officer and our office in particular will be looking at moving forward, because part of this diversification of revenue for the municipality may mean additional funding sources from outside, and making sure that our administration trail, particularly the way we spend the money and the outcomes that we get for the money, we want to make sure that that is as high quality as it can be.
Do they, when they file for their tax exemption, how often do they provide you an update of their federal exemptions for 501c3?
When they apply for their tax exemption on buildings, you mean for their actual real property?
Right.
That's a good question, and we would need to talk to the assessor about what that timing actually is. I know that they do audits, and particularly in the last 5 years, they did a very robust effort to audit all exemptions within the municipality, including charitable and nonprofit organizations. I think it could be very interesting to have Jack Adamus, the municipal assessor, come and give a presentation, particularly on what the assessor's office has been doing over the last few years.
Because as I understand that the organizations have to reapply every 3 years for their certifications. And so it'd be interesting somewhere down the line, to have Jack come and talk to us about that. Because the state code allows a municipality to assess them in lieu of taxes. And so there's probably a lot of money out there that is not being properly reviewed.
I think there's a chance that those reviews need to happen more frequently than they do. I also know that this has been a topic of conversation for many years. The state mandated exemptions that used to come potentially with some revenue associated with allowing for those exemptions no longer occurs, which puts the municipality in a very specific position.
Okay. So I think another question is that, well, it's actually doesn't, pertain to, this, but there's a number of states are being sued by a company called, Judicial Watch or voter registration lists. And like the city of Los Angeles, they had to remove 1.3 million people. And the municipality of Anchorage, I realized, were small, but I understood this last election that we had, there was 20,000 ballots returned. Do we know about that?
So I'll pull it back to grants real quick. I got a question about grant development versus purchasing. Grant development is kind of a revenue function, whereas purchasing is probably the grant administration function. Is that true?
Well, purchasing is actually the department that the municipal procurement goes through to purchase anything. And so the grant administration is usually done within whatever department the grant lives in or is appropriated through. So the health department has quite a few grants that run through it as part of their provision of services. So the health department administers those grants after approval from the assembly and all of the documentation is in order. The police department has a handful of grants that come from federal or state dollars for vehicles or equipment, for training, and those are administered by the police department. Part of the sort of exploration within the grant development office will be to figure out how those things should function ultimately, with an added layer of oversight into those departments as an outside entity who can check in with those grant administrators to say, okay, where's your quarterly report? How's it going? Do you have everything that you need? So that there is some additional support that has not existed in the last few years. And there's been some real challenges with getting grants out the door and with actually having the financials in order to get through our annual ACFR process.
Yeah, it's just one of the things in like major organizations and a lot of the oil and gas companies and are especially good at it, having like an OMS and a QMS quality management system where, like a group, like, you'd have a quality team, be similar to the I team or maybe in grant development as a functional lead to say, here's our policies and procedures at a level 1 level, and Department of Health would have a level 2 level grant administration plan. Is there anything like that tiered quality management system for operational policies and procedures manuals?
Well, frankly, that sounds great. And I think that that kind of structure can be incorporated into our thought process and how we're talking about this. I agree that there are different levels of complexity and difficulty with some of the grants that we either acquire or give out, and making sure that those audit and quality controls match those complexities is a really good idea.
What we see a lot is depending on the level of organizational maturity, you'll have really heavy, like real thick operational manuals that are kind of owned by each department individually, each division individually. And as you start to build up your quality management manual, that operational management manual starts to shrink.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more of an oversight function rather than just purely kind of reporting and doing things together. You have oversight groups that kind of do some of those things. It would be aspirational for sure. It's not a one-year thing that something like that happens, but I think for an organization with this big of a budget, it makes sense to at least think of how to step towards things like that.
That's very interesting. And OMB is, we, as the office are the keepers of the policy and procedures for the municipality and are going through a revision process of all 125 of them over the next year, trying to get through updating them. Some of them have not been updated since 1982 and are very outdated. And probably many of them don't even refer to technology that exists now or, are non-functional because of those changes. And I think that idea of that sort of oversight and grant management being thought through in those policies and procedures is a great idea.
And I think there's some, if you think a grant development division is like a federal or state capture group where how do we optimize capturing federal dollars? I know there's international ISO standards, International Standards Organization. Some of those federal grants require, the QMS is an ISO standard and they require some of those things for some of those. And I know that there's a standard for city, kind of local government QMSs as well. Again, not something that would happen in 1 year. It's definitely a longer term project, but just, I don't know, something that's on, I guess, as a comment. But maybe something that's been brought up multiple times in our meetings is the audit backlog. I don't know if you guys have a contact from the audit group that may be able to say, here's the audits we've completed in the last year. And here's kind of where our backlog and staffing looks like. So maybe just like, here's our progress on audits. Is that something that would be easy enough to get, or is that public information?
Well, I have a question for you in that instance. We have the internal audit department who does the annual audits of municipal functions, municipal boards and commissions. And then there is the controller's office, which does the accounting and the auditing for the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, formerly called the CAFR. And that audit is the thing that is well in the backlog. So my question to you would be, are you interested in an update from internal audit department or from the controller and finance division or both?
I think a lot of the grant administration audit information is in the ACFR.
That's right.
And so like, as they're working through that backlog, we get more and more of that, kind of seeing trends there. I think what I'd be interested in is like kind of the special audits, performance audits, the organizational side of things from the internal audit group. Is that in line with what people are thinking?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can talk to internal audit and see who can come and give presentations about their annual operations and where they stand on what is or is not outstanding. I know that they make their sort of annual audit requests or sort of their work plan, and the assembly can add to that. I don't know if there is a process by which the Budget Advisory Commission could also request through the assembly some additional reports or work, but that's something that we could look into.
I think maybe if we have them come speak, I don't want to take up a ton of their time, but
Sure.
maybe if they could send us some prep material, and then really it'd just be like a 5-minute presentation and maybe 5 minutes for questions. We can work that into the agenda. I think it'd be good. We've had a bunch of questions about audits. Might be better just to ask them if that's okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
Sorry, I sidetracked us with a bunch of questions. That's my fault.
Well, that's good. I think we're raising, some good points.
Yeah.
That usually results in some efficiencies and some changes. I mean, since 1982, let's see, that's 18 years. God, I was 40-something years old now.
If we can move on to the bond proposal, if that's of interest. The other packet that you have is the capital improvement budget. This is the overview section, essentially, or the bond section of the municipal capital proposal. And the first column on page 1 shows the total of the bond list and the proposed bonds being $58.9 million. That's in line with what the previous year's bond proposal was. I believe that was 57.9 or somewhere in that range. The total bond proposals usually are in the 40 to 65 range, depending on the year and I will say that the thing that is different from my perspective about this bond proposal from all the other bond proposals that I have seen is that they tend to be very road and drainage centered. And that is usually the larger amount of funding that is requested, tends to be in the $40 to $50 million range, depending on the projects that are requested. And as part of what Member Zalatel said about construction backlogs, et cetera, there was deliberate consideration given this year to the idea that the deferred maintenance in all other categories has been neglected for quite many years. In the budget book, there is a comparison of roads and drainage bonds versus public safety bonds versus parks and trails bonds. And the other two categories are regularly in single digits and under $2 million, depending on what the appropriation is. And that has created some imbalance in the fleet availability for some of our other departments, but specifically in some real safety impacts in our facilities maintenance. So our facilities bond on this is much larger than they have been in the past few years. And the police, fire, and traffic engineering bonds are larger than they have been in the past few years. And the road bond is slightly smaller in order to accommodate those changes, but also to accommodate the fact that this last construction season did see a backlog in purchasing and getting contracts out the door in order to get the work on the street. We're hoping that that is not going to be the situation in this upcoming construction season. We have shored up our purchasing process. We are working through a Title VII rewrite, which is municipal procurement. And ideally, that will not be an issue for construction season this year. If you turn to page 2, it gives you the breakdown of the bond request by department. And page 3 lists all of the individual projects that are being requested. So if you start at the top of page 3, it shows the fire department and their bond being $3.15 million, with 1.2 for a fire engine replacement and 1.2 for a water tender replacement, and $750,000 for the ambulance annual replacement program. There is a library bond being proposed for $150,000 for Chubiak Eagle River Library carpet replacement and $2.5 million of Lusac Library window replacements. This is the, I believe, second piece of the Lusac Library window replacement project, a portion of which was funded last year at about $500,000. In the capital budget book, there is a full description of the project and the number of windows that are being replaced, the number of skylights that are being replaced, the locations of them within the library, and the fact that the reason they are being replaced is because they have failed in the last few years. At one point, really damaging the Alaska room and some other rooms within the library. And so that detail is visible in the capital budget links that Aaron had sent around. The maintenance and operations bond at $4.7 million includes some Anchorage Senior Center renovations, the Facility Safety Code Upgrades annual program, which is the program that we use to set aside $2 million of funding to do the most important and necessary facility upgrades within any of our buildings. One of the challenges that M&O has had over the last few years is that they have had to onboard 12 additional facilities that they were not previously responsible for because of either dropping the lease. So the municipality owns the building, leases it to a private organization. That private organization does all of the operations and maintenance of that facility. Those leases were either not continued, people moved out of those buildings, some of them were not maintained well enough and created circumstances where the municipality had to take them over. So those 12 facilities that they have onboarded in the last 3 years did not come with any facility increase in funding for maintenance. So there is a lot of work to be done at maintenance and operations as far as assessing our municipal facilities and understanding how much it will actually cost to repair and maintain the facilities we have currently. It is very similar to what the school district is talking about with their asset analysis and figuring out which buildings are in what condition and how much they need in order to maintain them as such. So I think the municipality will be doing that in earnest. The next is the major municipal facility fire alarm system panel replacement. That is a very specific thing, and it is very important to life safety within our municipal buildings. And it's in fact a requirement. So the pool filtration system and building controls for the pools that the municipality is responsible for, but that the school district has on their properties, totaling 4.7 million. Parks and Rec has a long list of various small dollar changes within some of their parks and facilities. The largest of which includes the Fish Creek Trail to the ocean and 2.9 for Town Square Park development. That was a specific focus from the administration based on community feedback and the need for improved and safer public spaces, but particularly the situation that Town Square Park is in near all of the convention centers and entertainment buildings, and making sure that it is a welcoming and safe place to be. The police department has 1.5 million for the downtown headquarters generator upgrade. The downtown headquarters that we can see from here operates in emergency on generator backup and is not functional. So that probably needs to be fixed. 300,000 for a station gate replacement at the Elmore station, and 1.5 million for the heating delivery system over at that building. There is ice in one corner and a sauna in the other, and it's creating some really challenging work environments. And then ADA upgrades to those buildings and the Jewel Lake Training Center. This is the project management and engineering list. These are all the roads and drainage projects under the $33 million of bonding. The largest of which are construction projects, some of which are very small design projects. The municipality tries to balance out the projects between design and construction and feasibility. So there is always a movement of projects over time. And traffic engineering, this proposal specifically is an increase from last year and previous years to address some of the traffic challenges and the pedestrian deaths that we have been seeing around the municipality. It's 1.5 million for the annual signage and signal system within the municipality, $1 million to the school zone safety program, and $2 million to traffic calming and safety improvements. Those will all be prioritized if approved by the department and executed throughout the 2025 year. Any questions on those?
For the downtown park, Town Square Park development, what is the administration's plan for ensuring it stays a useful space, rather than reverting back to the current situation?
I think that's a good question. And I don't know the answer to that right now, but I think that's part of the conversation that the community will be having going forward as we talk about this bond proposal. How will the improvements within Town Square be protected and maintained to improve all of the surrounding areas as we sort of circle out from Town Square? I think that is the goal. So we can find an answer for you and bring it back when we have.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for bonds on parks and recreation. I think it should probably be around about $2.5 to probably $3 million. You know, when you take a look at the police department, fire department, roads, you know, a lot of money.
That hierarchy of needs, parks, communities.
And you take it the number,
Yeah.
you know, number of people, you know, that drive cars versus those that use the trails. You know, there has to be some equality there.
There are different costs associated, but one of the goals of this bond proposal and the conversation that we hope to have with the community is to say, we have heard that you want to like talk about what we can have, what we want, what we need, and how do we get it. And part of that conversation is to say, these are opportunities that we can take. Do you want to take them? And the conversation that will continue with the assembly over the next month, that then ideally engages the public to also give us their feedback on what these proposals are, the feedback from this body on this proposal. All of those things will be taken into consideration over the next month while the administration moves through the assembly and public process, but also the process as we get to a potential substitute version of the budget that would incorporate some changes and or incorporating assembly amendments on the floor on the night of, I think it's November 19th, somewhere around there is when budget passage is. The challenge of determining which investments to make are the thing we need the community to give us feedback on. You know, our purpose here is to pull together all of the information and the possibilities to say, these are the possibilities as we see them. Do you support these possibilities? Which ones do you prioritize, one over the other? From an anecdotal standpoint, as somebody who has seen bond numbers over 20 years, I would say that the sort of symmetry in the numbers outside of the road column is going to be an interesting conversation with the community. There's never really been that level of parity between the public safety bonds and the traffic bonds. And it'll be an interesting prioritization process, I think.
Just a quick time check. We're at 12:15.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
It's totally okay. I think this has been a good conversation. I think maybe if we want, we can continue this till 12:55 and then kind of talk about the next meetings, or we can talk about what we want to do in the next meetings now. It's up to the group here.
Well, I want to ask about the snow disposal site.
Yeah, I'd say we can continue on till 12:55 and then we'll talk about the next meeting and close out.
Is the intention, is the issue we're trying to address the cost of moving material to existing sites, or is there a lack of space at existing sites?
That bond is to specifically develop the West Anchorage snow disposal site. That funding went to, I believe, last year as the initial funding opportunity. This funding would have the snow disposal site, I believe, online by the beginning of the winter season in 2025. So not this next winter season, but they would get through, the bond would be approved in April, and then they would get through the summer season for construction and making it operational. And then when the snow flies in October of 2025, then that snow disposal site would be accessible, because frankly, there is not enough snow disposal locations within the community. It is part of the challenge with snow removal to begin with. If we don't have a place to take it, we can't remove it from the street. And once we run out of those snow disposal sites, the driving and hauling costs associated with the different locations becomes pretty intense. And so making those snow disposal sites more centrally located or specifically located will help with those costs.
Kind of more generally, how's any changes to the bond rating recently? And I guess bond costs overall have been up and bond interest rates kind of gone down.
The bond rating changes when we sell bonds, and we have not sold bonds since the last change. I believe that was maybe 2 months ago. The 2023 ACFR process is moving much more quickly than the 2022 audit did. And I don't personally have an estimated timeframe for the 2023 audit to be finished, but I can check in with the controller and find out what that might be. I believe it should be early next year. And then we will get closer and closer to being back on track with the appropriate timing of audited financials for the municipality for 2024.
So we're still working on 2023 now.
Yes, correct. 2022 finished maybe two months ago, and 2023 is getting ready to be closed out and move on to the third-party auditors very quickly.
When are they gonna have the software repaired to show a profit and loss?
And that will come, I think, with the 2023 audit, we'll be closer to our real final numbers because we will have only had 1 year to go through that is separate from that final ACFR number.
So then they can do a profit and loss statement.
Yeah, it'll be much easier to reflect accurate fund balance numbers for the 5 major funds, but also for all funds within the municipality.
And
You're
also,
talking more management.
Hmm?
You're talking more management.
well, yeah. So that way they can't overspend as much.
Well, there's no overspending if it's budgeted.
That's right, yeah.
Well, we're at 12:55, so maybe talk a little bit about the next meeting. Hopefully we can get some of these other applications into becoming appointees. I'll try my best to call around and see if we can get some on the assembly agenda. For the next meeting, I think this has been good. We should probably schedule a good amount of time, I think, just to talk about kind of generally what we want to do resolution wise, some of the ideas that some of the members had regarding this budget proposal. And I don't know, any other ideas? We have a few on here, property tax change and assessment methods, where we have Jack and Davis come in maybe, or maybe the internal audit group, or talk about gasoline user fee trust. Maybe we pick one of those and then schedule a good amount of time for open discussion about the budget and resolutions. But out of those kind of 3 options of outside of open discussion, is any preference for members?
I would like to see us, I think we'll have a pretty short discussion on the gasoline user fee. That ought to be set up in a trust agreement. And the controls of the trust, that there are certain conditions that can be used. Repaving and stuff like that, because guys, 14 or 16, I don't know how much we take in.
On the tax cap calculation, I think it was 14 and change last year,
Right.
and it's 14 and change this year. Let me see. 14.4 was the budget at 2024 revised, and 13.5 is the 25.
So that'll pave a lot of streets. A lot of potholes.
So maybe
Not as much as it should.
maybe we could schedule a little time for that. If you have more information on that, and that was kind of one of the increase in that came from when you were chair of the budget commission, right? The gasoline user fee trust. So,
It did, correct.
yeah, so maybe if you could email me a little bit of background or something, even if it's just bullet points or, stream of consciousness type stuff. And we can probably put some 15 or 20 minutes in for that, and hopefully 20 or 30 minutes in for a kind of open discussion about the budget. And I think those would kind of be the bulk of what we're doing with OMB hopefully available for questions. We're talking about kind of positions and resolutions on those things.
I could draft up, a letter or a resolution, but it doesn't have to be a resolution. It could be a letter to the assembly. And also attach the info. Does Lance Elber, does he still work for the city?
He does, yeah. He is the Director of Planning, Development, and Public Works. He's been in the
Okay.
same position he has been in. It's just a new name.
Perfect. So if we do that, I think that'd probably be kind of bulk our time for that meeting along with the informational report. So maybe we just plan on that. Who head with that? That's the idea.
The Associated General Contractors is very interested in this to see it go forward. So.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all that we got on our agenda then. Make sure. Yeah, so with that, I think we can take a motion to adjourn.
Is there a way that I could get an application to hand out to a couple of people I know that might be interested in serving on this board?
For the commission,
Yeah,
can we print those?
I can check that.
yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, just email them to me and I can.
Okay, great.
hand
We can
those
do that.
out.
All right.
I move to adjourn.
All right. Awesome. With that, we're adjourned right at 1 p.m. Thank you guys.
Do you want internal audit or property appraisal at the next one or in the December meeting?
Let's do it at December meeting.
Okay,
And then budget time, we'll talk about that. I think that makes sense. And they're probably good. Yeah. Don't want to waste their time.
and actually, property appraisal in